All right, I can see a few people joining from different countries. Exciting. So we have some people here from India, a lot from Europe. And someone just joined us from the US. Fantastic. Yeah, while we are waiting, it's a good idea to just send your countries in. We'll get a bit of an idea as to who we have in the audience. Okay, we have Adrian L from London. Okay, so while we are waiting, actually, I'm quickly going to introduce myself. I'm Priyanka from Fashion for Good. I'm coming to you from Amsterdam. I hope all of you guys are doing well today. In the interest of time, I think while we are waiting for a few more people to join in, I'll ask Nicola to just start a poll. Oh, there it is. Fantastic. If you guys can start answering this, we'll get an idea of who's in the room. Okay, most likely we'll get to see the result of this survey. Nicola, will you be able to share it? Okay, someone's saying there's a lot of echo on my side. Okay, is it better now? Hopefully it is. Good, we have a bit of poll sharing happening here between students, designers, startups, consultants, press, and individuals generally interested in the topic. All right. Okay, so I'm going to kick this off and hopefully more and more people will join through the session. Usually people are running late and join through the session as it goes on. Wonderful. Okay, so once again, I'm Priyanka from Fashion for Good. This is our Meet the Innovators session. Thank you again for tuning in here. This is certainly not our first one. In fact, we've done about 25 of these sessions over the past 3 years. In fact, the number keeps adding on now. This is our second virtual Meet the Innovators session for our South Asia platform, which we launched earlier this year. So we usually host these sessions in person in our headquarters in Amsterdam, or even in our satellite office now in Mumbai. And what we typically do at the beginning of these sessions is understand the audience demographics, which is kind of where the poll was just used of. So now we kind of understand who's in the room so far. So before I get started with the next steps and start introducing you guys to the innovators, I think it's a good idea to give a quick background on Fashion for Good. I can see, I know a bunch of you people on the audience, so a lot of you already know about Fashion for Good. But for the people for whom Fashion for Good and this event is new, I'm going to give you a quick 1-minute background or elevator pitch of Fashion for Good. All right. So Fashion for Good is a global initiative set up to connect innovators and industry to drive commercial adoption of sustainable solutions at every stage of the supply chain. Over the last 3 years, we've scouted for more than 2,000 startups from across the world, and we've supported over 100 of them through our accelerator scaling and innovation programs. We've recently, just earlier this year, launched our first satellite program in South Asia. The program in South Asia mainly focuses on industry partners, manufacturers, and brands, and bringing technologies from the region, and so supporting technologies that come from the region and beyond the region that can be scaled into the region. So with that said, earlier this year in January, we launched our first program and got our first 9 innovators. I'm very excited to announce that 2 of these innovators are here with us today. And today, you're going to hear from these 2 innovators called InfiniChains and BlockTexx. We have Parth here speaking first from InfiniChains. Parth is joining us from India. InfiniChains is a leading end-to-end track and trace solution that uses blockchain, artificial intelligence, and cloud computing to help brands and manufacturers to digitize sustainability practices. Some very exciting news from InfiniChains, which of course I'll let Parth share more in his session. But as of this month, they've mapped over 300 farmers on their platform. And Parth, it would be great if you can dig a little deeper into that in your session. Second, we have Adrian and Graham, co-founders of BlockTexx. They're joining us from Australia. So it's 9:30 p.m. there. They're staying up for this session. Thank you so much again. BlockTexx is a clean technology company that recovers polyester and cellulose from textile clothing. They're positioned at the end of the supply chain, where raw materials and end-of-use solutions have the highest environmental impact and also revenue potential. And I'll let Adrian and Graham talk more about it after. All right, so the way it works is that there's going to be a short pitch, about 10 minutes from each of the innovators. And right after their individual pitches, there's going to be a 10-minute Q&A session. And I'll do my best to keep us all in time, though I think we have plenty. What we've done now before the session, a lot of you attending the session today have sent us your questions. So we've kind of curated some questions already. But it'd be amazing if you guys can share more questions or put your questions in the Zoom Q&A feature. And I'll do my best to get them addressed through the session. All right, then. So I think that's it from my end. Over to you, Parth. I will give the screen to you.
Thank you, Priyanka. I'll share my screen. So just a small correction to what Priyanka said. We have finished mapping 300,000 farmers, not just 300. I'll talk a little bit more about, no problem. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm Parth Patil. I'm a co-founder and CEO at InfiniChains, and I'll be talking about Credible, which is our end-to-end traceability platform for the textile industry. So what are the problems in the textile supply chain that we are trying to solve? So first, there are huge inefficiencies in the way the compliance data is handled today. The processes that have to be done today, they are very time consuming, error prone, and very manual. Then secondly, there is a huge risk to brand reputation due to lack of transparency. There is lack of visibility into the supplier's value chain, and this tremendously increases the operational risk. And finally, poor food safety and recall systems. So tracking food origins across suppliers takes weeks. And as we all know, when there is a case of recall, time is of the essence. And today's systems are not optimized for doing this in the least amount of time. So what is our solution to these problems? The solution is an end-to-end traceability system which captures supply chain data at source, stores it in a tamper-proof manner, and provides easy data integration with partners. So with those features in mind, we built Credible, which is an end-to-end traceability system that uses mobile apps and IoT for data capture and blockchain for immutable data storage. So using the system, we are able to efficiently handle compliance data. We use mobile apps for capturing the data. We have done a lot of automation that makes it very easy to submit the collected data to compliance bodies. Secondly, we enhance brand trust. And we do this by providing high level of visibility in the vendor supply chain and sharing this visibility with various stakeholders. Finally, we provide effective safety and recall systems by providing both forward and backward traceability, which allows the recall to be done in a very short time, and it allows very specific and surgical recall, which saves a lot of effort and money at the end of the day. So this is an example of a supply chain for organic cotton. So what we have done in our platform is throughout the value chain, we have provided various ways to capture data and store that in our secure system. And then we stitch all those data points and provide end-to-end traceability. So in case of organic cotton, for example, our data capture starts from distribution of the non-GMO seeds, the distribution of seeds to the farmers. And for that, we have created mobile apps that the employees of the organization called field officers who are responsible for distribution can use our mobile app, do the distribution and capture evidence that they gave the seeds to the farmer on the farm at a specific location. So we capture all that metadata, and that's how we are able to add a high level of trust to that transaction. So there is location information, there is information about who did the distribution. So there is a digital signature of the field officer who handed the seed to the farmer. So in the same way, we capture data at every step in the supply chain using mobile apps or direct integration into existing ERP systems. And then we stitch all this data together to show an end-to-end traceability. We have also employed drones to capture data on the farm side. This increases efficiency and it removes manual intervention and possibility of errors or mucking with the data. So here you can see an example where we can automatically map the farm boundaries, and we can also classify what kind of crops are being grown on the field. So using our platform, we have been able to improve the efficiency by 3x or reduce the effort by 3x. We now have 300,000 farmers whose data is being managed on our platform. In some cases, we have been able to save up to 2,000 man days for our customers, which is roughly equivalent to 6 man years. So this is an end-to-end view of one of the supply chains that we have mapped. This is again for cotton. So here you can see that a brand can actually look at all the details associated with their sales order. So they can begin with tracing their sales order, go into the line items within the sales order, then they can keep drilling into the individual components all the way till the farmers from whom the cotton was sourced. We also provide mobile apps for the end consumers to look at the traceability information by scanning a QR code on the garments or the products. And we also allow the customers to engage with the ecosystem by making a donation to projects that benefit the farmers and the workers who created their garments. So that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Parth. There are a couple of questions that we got beforehand, and we'll just start with that. I know that you spoke about saving worker hours, saving man hours. How does this platform benefit low-level farmers and workers in the supply chain? Like, there is an aspect of saving man hours that you mentioned. If you can expand upon that, that would be great.
Correct. So what we have done is we have automated a lot of data entry tasks which used to consume a lot of time of the workers, and they didn't allow these workers to do the actual valuable things for which they were hired in the first place. So we found that a lot of people were just spending their entire day filing for compliances, filing for certificates, right? They were going on these websites, putting this data line by line and just sitting at their desk all day. And when we looked at what their actual job was, it was to actually go and interact with the farmers and educate them on how to do organic farming and how to improve efficiency, right? So they were kind of bored with what they were doing. And when we gave them these tools, they are now so excited that they can just click one button, our system goes and takes care of all the data entry, and they can go off and do like more valuable things. So that is one example. Then also in case of farmers, what we have been able to do is, based on the information that we have for these farmers, we are able to connect them with loan providers. So there are a lot of loan providers in India who currently were lacking detailed information about the farmers. Like, what are these farmers growing? What was their yield for the previous season, right? So they were not able to assess the risk of this farmer. So using our platform, it becomes very easy for banks to see what is the estimated yield for the farmer in the given season, and accordingly they can give out loans in a very fast manner. And then finally, we also have been able to connect some grants and some basically capital that the brands want to be distributed to farmers and workers. We have been able to trace those kind of distributions on our platform, on our blockchain platform. So when that money comes in, the brands can actually see whether the money was distributed in a fair way to the farmers and the workers for which that money was allocated.
Fantastic. A quick follow-up question to that. Because you mentioned that a lot of this data is actually fed into the app manually by these workers. Is there any risk of error because of the manual entry of data? And I know you mentioned the drone system that actually taps it. Does that mitigate it completely?
Correct. That's a great question. We get that very often. So how do we ensure that the data entered is correct or authentic, right? And it is not like falsified or there is some error in that. So there are various ways to tackle that problem. Like one way is by limiting what kind of entries someone can make in the app, right? So for certain quantities, we know what is the range in which they can enter the values, right? So we limit to those values. And then there are ways where we capture a lot of additional information along with the transaction that is being performed, right? So for example, I told you the transaction where the field officer gives the organic seeds to the farmer, right? So we want to make sure that this transaction really happened. So what do we do for that? We capture the location where this transaction happened through the GPS that is in the phone, right? So it becomes difficult to falsify that. Then we make them take pictures of them handing the seeds to the farmer. And then the digital signature of the field officer who made this transaction is directly attached to the transaction data. So because of blockchain, we can offer these guarantees. There is no way to like separate the data from the digital identity of the person who inserted this data in the system. So this is the beauty of blockchain. This is why everyone is so excited about blockchain. Like it is absolutely difficult to like tamper with, and it is very easy to audit what happened.
Fantastic. You kind of, I think, partially answered my next question, but I'm still going to go ahead and ask this in case you have some additional points. The next question was, what benefits do you see in using blockchain in comparison to other regular chain of custody solutions with transaction certificates?
Correct. So as I said, so one fundamental thing about blockchain is it is tamper proof till the very bottom of the pyramid, right? So there are systems that are built where the tamper proof nature is only at a higher application level. But if somebody can get directly at a lower level, like on the file system, they can manipulate things, right? But in the blockchain, you can actually prove that the data cannot be manipulated even by the system administrator. So that is the beauty of blockchain. And then the other point that I said, that every piece of information is tagged with the person who did that transaction. So again, that makes it very easy to see that if wrong information was entered, you can quickly check like who made this entry, right? And then you can basically talk to them and see whether they did this on purpose or was this an error where they need more training to basically do this properly. And then also just sharing the data with all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, right? Is very easy with blockchain. Like once you know that nobody can just tamper the data without you knowing, it becomes much more easy to share that common source of truth with all your stakeholders.
Got it. So I have quite a few pre-curated questions as well, but I'm going to move to some of the questions that are coming in now. Quite a few of them, in fact. Following on to that question, there's a question by Christine, and I'm not sure if you can actually answer this. It says, can you speak more about the blockchain element? Which blockchain technology are you using? Is that something that you can
Sure.
disclose?
Yeah. We use a product called Hyperledger Fabric. It's an open source blockchain system from IBM, and it is one of the leading solutions out there that people are using to solve problems with blockchain.
Fantastic. There's a question from Harshita. Do you also trace the waste that comes out post the manufacturing of a garment? I assume this means the pre-consumer waste. Are you able to take?
So honestly, we haven't done much work on that front. I think Graham and team might be able to answer that better. But we haven't done a lot of work on that part of the value chain yet. We are more focused on like how something is getting created. But maybe in the future, if there is enough demand from our customers, we might look into that.
Fantastic. Harshita, I'm going to save your question for the Adrian and Graham's presentation also in case they have a take on this. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Jean is the next person, which is, please describe how the system captures production supply chain. Please describe how the system captures production supply chain member data from spinning to fabric and retail and even upcycle inputs like BlockTexx. So I think you've already answered the upcycle inputs part.
Correct. So
you answer the rest, yeah.
So at a high level, it is basically it's a mix of providing different ways to input the data in our system. So on the farm side, we have provided mobile apps. There are also certain stages in the production stages where we provide mobile apps to establish continuity between batches of products at various stages. Then we also integrate into standard ERP systems like SAP. So we already have built that. We are also looking into providing more easy integrations into other systems, and also providing just a very comprehensive API that people can use to just hook in all kinds of data into our system.
Fantastic. I have time for actually one more question, and I'm going to pick Chandni's, which is, could you name some brands using this technology? I know that this is an innovation that's still in the process of actually reaching scale, but maybe you can touch upon the companies that you've worked with in the past.
Right. So we already have 2 large manufacturers in India who are trying this out internally. There is Pratibha Syntex Limited. They're based out of Indore. They specialize in organic cotton based garments. So they supply to Nike, Adidas, H&M's, Patagonia. And then the second customer we have is Wellspun India. They're again a big manufacturer who specialize in making terry towels and basically home furnishings. So they are using our solution to basically show the provenance of towels made from Egyptian cotton, and they're expanding into other product lines as well. And then third, we have a customer in Malaysia called Henghia. They are one of the largest recyclers in Malaysia. They are using our traceability for their ocean plastic product line, where they want to prove that the recycled plastic that they are selling is indeed harvested from the oceans. And for that, again, you need to show traceability, and they're using our system for that.
Fantastic. I think that answers Chandni's questions. There are quite a few other questions, some that are more generic, which I'll leave for the end of the session. But for now, thank you so much, Parth, and wonderful. We will come back to you after for some common questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Adrian and Graham, fantastic. Do you want to share your screen? You're on mute, yeah.
Okay. Oops, that's not the screen. No, apologies. Yes, share screen. Okay, so everybody should be able to see our screen now. Can you hear us, Priyanka? Can you hear us?
Yes, perfect. Go on.
Perfect, great. Well, thanks very much. It was great to follow Parth. It was a very comprehensive deep dive into his business and fascinating. And also, I guess we'll be able to touch on it. We certainly do dovetail that we have integrated blockchain technology into and traces into our resource recovery process. So BlockTexx is a textile recovery technology, and I think what's really interesting, I'll just overlay where we're positioned, we'll delve into the business, but traditionally we talk about waste management, and what we often forget that the stuff that we regard as waste is actually often a wonderful resource. And I think that's where Adrian and I came at from our perspective of being in the industry. We looked at the volumes of materials that were often destined to landfill because they didn't have an alternative route to go to. And they could have not only a second life, as we have, through reuse and donations through charities, but also multiple lifetimes. And what we needed to do was look into developing some technology, some advanced technology that allowed us to recover those resources and then repurpose them back into, whether back into textiles, but back into other products that could continue on. And so our perspective was that whilst there was an amazing amount of fibers around the world and fabrics, the most common was a polyester cotton blend, and that was certainly when we started a couple of years ago. It was certainly the holy grail of recycling, and one to tackle, because that was effectively 80% of fibers and fabrics around the world. And so we targeted that, as has a couple of other companies in this space, and we're all very much at that sort of nascent stage. And what will allow us to do is to evolve into what will be a future recycling industry that will then be able to feed back into the entire supply chain through efficiency in supply chain, design changes, and also future fabric manufacture.
So importantly, we don't see ourselves as a waste recovery business. We don't see ourselves as a traditional waste recycler. I think that terminology has a baggage to it that is not particularly useful. BlockTexx is a clean technology business. We see ourselves as the future. We see ourselves as a clean tech company. We see ourselves as a business that actually takes what is traditionally described as waste, and we convert that waste into high value inputs and raw materials for future advanced manufacturing businesses. So we simply take polyester cotton fibers and fabrics and textiles, and we convert those into cellulose and rPET that have further uses into advanced manufacturing industries, whether that's into textiles, which is useful, but can also be into other areas, which is such as manufacturing, building, and industrial processes.
Technical problem. Ah, there we go. So I think what was important, given that there's probably a wide range of people on this webinar, that we kind of delve into why there is an importance for businesses like BlockTexx to exist. The fundamentally is that there's so much product manufactured each year and consumed and turned over that what hasn't caught up is the end of life processes to recover those back into alternative functions. When we kind of look at some of the, there's been many reports done over the years, but we're talking about something like 140 million tons by 2030 of textile waste. Now, if you look at it from a perspective, that is a real problem. We can look at it from the perspective, as we do, that's a tremendous opportunity for the industry to start to retool itself, to start to look at this as a positive rather than a negative. Now, chemical recycling companies like BlockTexx aren't the holy grail. We aren't the solution. We're one of the solutions for this challenge. Fundamentally, reuse is absolutely the first thing we should be doing. But then there's also other ways we can bring into different streams. But the challenge we have is that there's still 140 million tons. So you need to start to build scalable, commercial scale processes that can deal with this challenge, that integrate straight into the supply chain. And we not only from a perspective of you've got somewhere for those end of life to go, so you've got brands to have some targets, they've got some design changes. You also can prove provenance and traceability through blockchain and traces. Then you start to fundamentally reimagine the industry we're in, and that's very much where we're coming from. And I think it's an incredible positive. The challenge we have as an industry is that we're all incredibly busy, we're all incredibly passionate about what we're doing, and finding the time, and I guess what's really important and what we do need to see, and what we've seen in some of the reports that have come out of Fashion for Good, and is that fundamentally we need to be putting more money in innovation. We need to be getting these sorts of technologies into a commercial scale when they can really start to show their worth. They can also start to inform the brands that are working with them. And they can also start to look at what does the industry look like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So rather than kind of at times feeling that we're overwhelmed with this textile waste, or it's not recognized, or it's over-recognized, the industry itself has an opportunity to funnel into that. And that's where we're particularly positioned ourselves. But I think importantly, when we start to look at the textiles, it is incredibly complex, not only from a design point of view, but from a makeup of a garment point of view. And so there may be areas where we need to sort of funnel in our interest in regards to where do we start? And I think the most important thing, and one of the things that we as BlockTexx fundamentally get a little frustrated about, is that we want to get into action. So what we need to do is start with projects. And one of the things that we've enjoyed about being part of the Fashion for Good alumni is that there is avenues for companies like ours to find our feet. We're not going to be at huge commercial scale in a short period of time. It's got to take incremental times, but what it needs is a correlation of the willing to make things work. And that's where we're positioned.
I mean, I think we have to understand that the export market is failing. We cannot continue to, particularly post-COVID, we cannot continue to export our problems from one country to another and hope that somebody else deals with. So the answer, as Graham and I was saying, that the future to our problem is to deal with innovation, is to actually challenge the status quo and deal with innovation. So we've built a business and have invented processes, and we have patent pending processes by which we, instead of just moving the problem around the world and hoping that nobody notices, we've actually decided to deal with the problem at source. And our chemical recycling solution takes up polyester cotton fabrics and fibers and textiles, and we convert it through our process into recycled polyester pellets, an example you can see on the screen here, and also into high-value cellulosic powder, which has uses industrial and construction aspects. But the most important thing is that we understand that you can't just hope the problem goes away. You can't export the problem or move the problem around. You have to have a volume solution that deals with the volume problem and does it in a clean technology kind of way. That's what our soft process does. We convert textiles into high value raw materials for future advanced manufacturing businesses. So we're very good at giving advice. We're very good at giving good advice. And we'd also welcome your questions at this point of time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have quite a few questions here already lined up, and I'm starting to see some more come in here. I think I'm going to start with my previously curated questions first. So the first question here is that, do you also trace the waste that comes out of the post-manufacturing of a garment, so post-consumer waste, or is it just pre-consumer waste?
No, we take from all ends. So absolutely, there is complexity in sorting and a cost to doing business with post-consumer. If you're taking a bag of clothes, obviously coming from pre-consumer or post-industrial, there's a much more controlled amount of sortation, and that does help. The other thing that I think we, in certainly our position, we do understand is that post-consumer clothes there is an effect on those particular fibers that have either been exposed to the UV light or been overwashed, or how they've been worn. That can have a impact on the recovery of those materials. And so there's a cost to doing that as business. So we also look at not only pre and post-consumer clothing, but there's an opportunity to look at all textiles. So the stuff we walk on, the stuff we sit on, the stuff we look at. And so I think there's a whole lot that is involved in the fashion industry that we can actually address as well.
Fantastic.
I think this is a really important point, because we mustn't just think of, I mean, unfortunately, we think of, and I came from the fashion industry, so we tend to have this rather, I think, narrow view that unless it's come from, if it's come from textiles, unless it goes back to textiles, we haven't kind of achieved sort of recycling nirvana. And I think that actually our view is that textile waste exists everywhere. It exists in hospitals, in restaurants, in hotels, in the clothes that we wear, in the textiles that we sit on, the trains that we travel on. There's textiles everywhere. All those textiles can be recycled. So we have to widen our view that it's not just the clothes that we wear. It's not just the fashion that we produce. It's the textiles that are consumed in everyday living.
So I think the next question will relate to this a little, that because in the presentation also you highlighted the issue of scalability. And when you say the issue of is scalability, is this a technical issue, or is it a question of just offtake by the industry?
It's not the industry. There's two sides to this discussion. Scalability, this is again an interesting misconception, in that I think chemical recycling is absolutely scalable. It just depends how you design your solution. We've worked very closely with industries that are comparable to ours, that actually have faced the same problem as ours, but with different products. So you think about the laundry industry, the brewing industry, the food manufacturing industry. They're all dealing with large volumes of stuff that people need to move in an economic way. So we've learned how to do that. So the scalability actually isn't an issue, and you can do that economically if you just think about the solution differently. I think that, again, the outputs, and this is again, I come back to my industry. If you insist that textiles go back into textiles, you're limiting your markets. If you're truly concerned about circularity, if you're truly, really concerned about sustainability, you'll insist that actually there is a circular economy. And so textiles can go back into industrial. Textiles can go back into building. Textiles can go back into a variety of uses that aren't textiles. But that doesn't mean it's not a circular solution. It just means it's not a textile solution. And that's something the industry's really got to get its head around.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, because when textile industry looks at solutions, they probably just look at textile output also out of it.
Because they're selfish.
You kind of then lie into multiple industries. I'm going to move on quickly to the one question that I think we've gotten from maximum people, which is the materials that BlockTexx works with. How do you deal with mixed textiles or blended textiles? Do you particularly work on cotton poly, or is it more than that?
Yeah, we as I said earlier, we focus on polyester cotton, and that can be 50-50, 80-20, 70, doesn't matter from our perspective. Yeah. We've done a lot of paid trials with many brands and other textile makers, so we can work with different deniers. It doesn't matter. We can deal with man-made cellulosics as well. One of the things that's really important for us when we started our business was that we didn't want to create a waste. When we focused on tackling polyester cotton, we wanted to make sure we could recover both fibers, and that's what we did. So when you start thinking polyester cotton and maybe some spandex or nylon, that starts to create a waste at this present stage, and that's something we choose not to deal with, because that creates a waste. We've got some ideas around that, but at this present moment, there's more than enough polyester cotton for us to keep our plants busy for a very long time. I think what we need to start thinking about is how do we funnel those particular products into companies like ours? I think there's a lot of companies who are going, I've got this problem, and there isn't a technical solution at this present moment. And that's not to say there won't be one tomorrow, but there's still a reasonable amount of product that can be funneled into these sorts of problems. So yeah, polyester cotton, bring it on.
Fantastic. I think it sort of answers the next question, which was, what is the percentage of waste generated post-processing? Is there another part that you want to add in here?
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is that with any recycling for recycling's sake, in a sense, is really worthwhile, but it's economically not sustainable. You have to create a recycling business that actually makes a return for its shareholders. So therefore, if you think about the largest food group in the world in terms of cotton, in terms of fiber, it's blended fabrics and it's polyester cotton. Does that cover every fabric mix in the world? No, but it covers about 75 to 80% of the worldwide manufacturing of fibers. So we take the view that if you focus on the 80% of the problem, you'll build a great business, you'll build a really sustainable model, and that will fund the cash flow that actually allows you to focus on those other smaller groups, such as wool and lycra and leather and polyethylene and polypropylene, all of which are important. But unless you're building a strong business around polyester and cotton, you haven't really got a business and you're not really solving the problem.
Absolutely. So digging, because I have quite a few questions popping up for you guys here, I'm going to go a little more quickly. Dushyant asks, what is the energy cost and environmental impact for the conversion you just talked about? So the cost and the environmental impact of BlockTexx procedure.
Well, okay, so we're currently operating at a pilot stage, and so we're currently raising our Series A round. So if there's anybody's interested in funding the future in innovation in textiles, we'll more than happily talk to you. So we've obviously done some scoping around that. It's probably something we're not ready to reveal at this stage, but what I can say, and we have done some work around life cycle assessment in regards to what's the positivity about our business, and I think that's where you'll see the most amount of returns on these sorts of companies. And so we've worked out if for every kilogram of textiles we reprocess or recover, we offset 29 kilograms of CO2 emissions. And that's the sort of stuff you need to start looking at. And so we have plans around renewables. We have very little waste. We have a 95% recovery of our processing. It's a very high yield. We've been very efficient in the regards of how we've manufactured that. It's pointless recycling and doing more harm. That's not where we come from. So I think CO2 emissions is where we need to start looking as an industry.
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is that we recycle all our water. We produce no waste chemicals. And for every 1 kilogram we recycle, we offset 29 kilograms of CO2e. And so we can get involved in these lengthy discussions around what happens if. My and Graham's response to that is that that's fantastic. What happens if we don't?
Okay, so just so you know, Graham and Adrian, questions are piling up.
Okay.
We're fascinated. We could talk all night.
But I'm going to restrict it to about 2 or 3 questions now to help close, since we are coming to the close of an hour. And the next one is from Jean, and she asks, is your tech portable? Can it be implemented closer to the point of collection? And how are the effluents from your separation process? So it's kind of 3 questions in one.
Yeah, that's a bit of a sneaky question. The short answer is the solution must always go to the problem. And so our business model is that we will continue to refine our technology here in Australia, but then this will be a licensed solution. This will be a solution we will take to the problem. There's 0 point transporting textiles around the world. So this solution will go to the problem. So absolutely, yes, it's scalable and it will move country by country with the right license partners. What was the second question?
It was about the affluents, which is, sorry,
What we
yeah,
use.
how are the affluents from your separation process?
Look, the simple answer is we don't put anything into the water course at all. There's 0 waste. We recycle all of our water. We recycle all of our chemicals that we use. The byproduct of our process is technically water, and all those have dealt with in Australia. The only thing we put into the waste system is actually water. So we don't produce any effluents. There's no point being a recycling business if you produce waste. You have to produce a clean solution. So we don't produce any effluents.
Fantastic. And Harshita asked that with recycling done through unorganized channels, which is kind of a fact in many countries, do you see challenges in getting control over the feed load, feedstock or raw materials for your business? It's a very interesting question because I'm sure you've discussed this a lot with brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly every country's different. There's certain models within certain countries that are very efficient. We're not, as I said earlier, we're one of the solutions. So if there's already a solution that's working within that environment, well, then that solution should continue. We're there to pick up the pieces where there isn't a solution, or there's so much volume that you need a really serious commercial scale. But equally, we're more than happy to partner with those existing existing infrastructure, and picking up the pieces. I think from our place in Australia, the charity segment does a lot of work in reuse of clothing, and it's something that we as Australians, if you've got something that you're not wearing, you tend to donate to the charity. And that's great if it can be resold, but there's a whole bunch of garments that are ripped, torn, stained, or just plainly soiled or loved to death, that their only other opportunity is to go to landfill. And that's where BlockTexx comes in. So we're not about taking over the reuse of garments. We think garments should be left in as much life as possible. But when you've loved your t-shirt to death, send it to BlockTexx.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is the issue is that we only want to recycle that which can't be reused. If it can be reused or reworn, that's the best form of recycling. If it can't be, then the worst form of recycling is burning it or burying it. And that's when we have a solution. But we see that we will work with the existing infrastructure that supports reuse, but we're part of the solution, not another. And we certainly don't see ourselves competing with existing solutions. We see ourselves complementing them.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask this last question, and I know I'm missing a couple of questions here, but we'll do our best in the next week or so to answer, at least through email, all of these questions directly. The last one here is very similar to the one we have for Parth, which is, are there any fashion brands that are using this technology at the moment?
Sorry. No, that was for BlockTexx, right? No, please go ahead.
That was actually for Graham and Adrian. We also had this question for Parth. He's already answered this.
Okay, cool. So at this stage, we're working with an Australian brand at the moment. We're having obviously plenty of conversations with many brands around the world. I think I would come back to where we've discussed on a couple of occasions. There's an opportunity to invest in innovation that will not only support the brand, your brand going forward, but also support the industry. And I think that's for all brands in the space. There's also, as Adrian said, recycling for the sake of recycling, or dealing with textile waste just to get rid of it, doesn't solve the solution. And where we position ourselves is that we are a supply and demand. So there's an opportunity to take clothes that were destined for landfill, recover those resources and bring them back into your supply chain. And that can be back into your textile supply chain, or could be back into your retail fit out, a whole bunch of other areas that you're doing. So I think that's where brands can start to really get engaged. And it is a challenge. There is a challenge of end-of-life clothing. And if it can't be reused, then the only option is to burn it or bury it. And sending to companies like ours, that's only half the solution. It has to come back in, because there's value back into your business.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adrian and Graham. I have one last question that I'd like to ask all of you, all three of you, in fact, Graham, Adrian, and Parth, which was asked by Parth, but I think it's interesting to get a take from all of you guys on this, which is, can disruptive innovations help industry in uplifting the present situation? And I assume here by present situation, we are referring to the post-corona world. And if you think there is an opportunity here, who would like to take it first?
Parth, after you, please.
So as a technologist, I would say absolutely yes. I'm clearly biased, but at the same time, I mean, the solution has to be pragmatic, right? The technology solution, we have to see whether it is solves the problem in the right way. It is cost effective, right, and can be adopted easily. So few years back, if you had asked me, I would be like, technology can solve any problem. But after enough real life experience, I have come to learn that technology can help, but you have to be pragmatic, work closely with your customers, and focus on the problem, obsess about the problem, and then find the best solution for it. Whether it is technology or it is it could be non-technological, right? It could be a process innovation. It could be business innovation, a new business model.
I'll jump in because leave Adrian have the last word. What we're seeing here in this country is that, from perspective in regards to COVID and the challenges we face by being sort of at the bottom of the world and importing a lot of our stuff, is that there's a lot of manufacturing or setting up to manufacture personal protection equipment, whether that's face masks or actual clothing. So what we're seeing is an opportunity to reshore some of our textile manufacturing here in this country, because of the challenge we've faced of getting that sort of material here, and there's been a challenge getting it out of other countries. And so what we're seeing is there's actually an energization in this country for advanced manufacturing, but also a focus on textiles. And off the back of that, in regards to us in particular, is that we're seeing companies are saying, okay, well, we can do the manufacturing here, but why don't we do it with recycled material? So why don't we close the loop? So they're actually thinking about closing the loop from the start, as opposed to trying to solve a problem of extra waste. So I think that's been a real positive from COVID.
Yeah, I'll be very succinct. I think as we all emerge from COVID, which eventually we all will, I think that every person who is naturally a consumer is more fearful, is more apprehensive, and therefore seeking those industries and those businesses which have real purpose and can demonstrate that purpose and that honesty. I think that will actually support businesses such as Parth, businesses such as ours, and the other ones Fashions for Good are involved with. I think that the consumer is actually more concerned around demonstrable purpose now. Do you actually do something good rather than just say you're doing something good? So ultimately that will support businesses like our own, because I think the fear that's been generated by COVID can actually be a force for good ultimately.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think that's a great closing line. It was wonderful talking to all three of you. It was fantastic learning about BlockTexx and InfiniChains. And thank you so much for giving your time. And to everyone else, just to close out, a quick mention, we are hosting weekly online events. And you can find out more about all of these upcoming events on our website, also on our social media platforms, LinkedIn, everywhere. All right, then. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope it was as interesting for all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.